I am Dr. Kelly Johnson. I am originally from Mississippi. Went through high school, had a very interesting experience, but I did graduate top of my class. So I did. And after that, I went to the Navy. I went to the Nuclear Power School program. After that, I went to college. Got my BA in management, MBA, then subsequently the PhD in public policy.
Which bleeds into what you're up to now. So you are running for state senate.
Yes, I'm running for state senate, District 35.
Okay.
And that encompasses Southern Fulton, like Fairburn, Union City, parts of South Fulton, not the entire city, Douglas, and Douglas County.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a pretty big area.
So that's why I wanted to talk to you. One of the biggest goals that I have with YAZ Entertainment is that I want to shift the narrative of the LGBTQ community, particularly when it comes down to Black LGBTQ faces and voices, because we are always, like you said, you used the word marginalized, you know, and we're always, in my opinion, misrepresented in the media. Right. And a lot of Black dinner tables don't have comprehensive conversations about the Black gay experience of what it means to be a Black gay person. There's a lot of stereotype, there's a lot of, you know, misconception that, in my opinion, leads us to maladaptive behavior. That's where you get violence toward gays and just all of this other stuff that falls under the umbrella of marginalization. Right. So I wanted to talk with you because you are hopefully about to sit in a seat of power. And so what does that mean for you as a Black gay man sitting in a seat of power? What does that mean for you?
Well, what it means for me is that it means representation, but it also means elevation. It means that our priorities and what we want as a community is being elevated to the state. And that means that, you know, we as a people have to kind of come together and say, what are our priorities? We haven't done that yet. And a lot of people are kind of grading us, especially other people that are already in those seats of power. They're grading us on an imaginary test that hasn't necessarily been written yet. And so I think for us as a community, we have to know what we want first. And, you know, I've worked in the Black gay spaces, I've worked with Georgia Equality in different situations, but I want to do is to be that representation for people that are marginalized continually.
So in representing, what exactly specifically do you want? What are you going to be pushing or fighting for?
First of all, I want, for me, the first priority is climate change. Because we know that climate change will affect communities of color first. And we have to start having that conversation amongst ourselves. I mean, we're not, this is going to hurt us first.
A lot of us don't even think it's real.
Right.
You know?
And when you talk about things like food insecurity and food deserts and climate change actually making that worse. Yeah. You know, a lot of those deserts and food insecurity are in climates or in communities of color. Yeah. And so if we're not having that conversation amongst ourselves as to what we want to see going forward and how we plan to contribute to minimizing the effects of it, then we're kind of signing our own death certificates. For me, next is really better education. And what I mean by that is that, you know, every representative always talks about education. We talk about education, giving more money, giving more money, giving more money to it. I'm like, well, that hasn't necessarily increased income, or not necessarily income, but outcomes for children. So what I propose is that we add things like critical thinking and problem solving back to the education curriculum. But also, we talk about climate change. We talk about financial literacy. We talk about social media as well, too, because if you look at financial literacy, that's 90% of a person's life. You have to deal with credit scores. You have to deal with mortgages. You have to deal with student loans. You have to deal with credit cards, taxes. All that's financial education. Why are we not teaching our children that is beyond me. You know, this is something that affects us all directly.
So hearing you talk about some of the things that are top priority for you, it's interesting that I don't hear anything, and this is not necessarily an indictment or a bad thing, but I don't necessarily hear anything that is on its face gay forward, you know? And that's interesting to me because I hear the word gay agenda. So in the conversation, everybody thinks that the gay community is out to ruin our children and convert everybody to, you know.
Right.
And it's just interesting to hear someone like yourself who is on this journey that you're on politically. Right. You don't really have a gay agenda.
Well, first of all, the gay agenda is a boogeyman. It doesn't exist.
Right.
At the end of the day, gay people want the full rights and responsibilities they are paid for, i.e. taxes.
Right.
And that means great education. That means being protected from discrimination laws. That means that, you know, they have business opportunities.
Right.
That they're creating jobs.
Right.
You know, that they're creating value for the community. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be attached to the word gay.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, gay folks want the same thing that straight folks want.
True.
Security.
Right.
You know, that is first and foremost. You know, if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy, security is first.
Right.
And so for the gay community, that is what we want. That is what we're fighting for right now, because we haven't met that basic need yet.
Right.
And to make us self-sufficient, we have to get to that place.
That's so interesting, and it's powerful because I was reading, and I mean it's becoming obvious that millennials are now, or even younger millennials are now of the age where they can vote.
Absolutely.
And large numbers of us, because I'm a millennial as well, but large numbers of us are showing up to the polls and even on social media, joining the political conversation. From your perspective, what do you want to see from younger gays in a political perspective?
Okay. What I want to see is that I want us to become more active, and that means by voting, and also supporting candidates that look like us.
Right.
I think that's been a big gap in our community, is that support and that, you know, that follow through. You know, your vote does count. It counts for a lot of things. And if it didn't count, we wouldn't spend, or folks wouldn't spend so much time trying to make sure it doesn't.
Right.
And you know, we also have to stop telling ourselves that it doesn't count.
Right.
Because that's a narrative that has seeped into our community that is a false narrative, and it's a flat out lie.
Yeah.
2020 is coming up. Census. Get counted, because there are so many different things that come from being counted in the census, and no one's going to show up your door and take you off to jail because you participated in the census. That's another conservative lie.
Right.
It's a lie.
Right.
They can't do that.
Right.
But this determines how much federal money we get. This determines how our districts are cut. This determines how much representation we have in the House of Representatives. So it's really important that we get counted as a collective. And just, if you ever decide to run, please do, because you never know who you are inspiring to do the same.
True.
So if you have a voice, use it.
Yeah.
You know, if it's entertainment, if it's writing, if you want to be a politician, use it. Don't be afraid not to. So what does support look like from the young Black LGBTQ community? I'd say 3 T's: your time, your talent, or your ties. You know, if you have a marketable skill that would help the candidate and also yourself, come together, collaborate. We need to stop being afraid of one another. And we also need to learn more about our own community, the people that we're lumped with. And so we got to move forward as more of a collective. And we also need to sit down and talk about what are our priorities. What do we want to see?
And I think to even answer that question, you have to have a solid understanding of self.
You do.
And this is where politics and culture go hand in hand.
Right.
Yeah, you're itching to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. You're absolutely right. But a lot of our culture is predicated upon kind of taking away a lot of responsibility, of personal responsibility, and we have to be mindful of that. We have to also be aware that, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Right. This is what we need to do. Yeah. And we have to understand that personally, if we want to see things change, we have to do it. We need to stop waiting for someone to do it.
Yeah.
Look, ain't nobody coming to save you.
Right. Exactly.
This is it. So, you know, for me, it's really start being active. You know, no one's coming. You know, and we have to live our lives like that every day. Is that no one's coming to save you. It is what it is. The more comfortable we get with that, the better that we will. The better our community will fare.
Right.
Because then we'll start talking about the things that we should be talking about.
Right.
You know, such as HIV and AIDS and you know, housing. You know, there are a lot of issues with the Black gay community that we have, but we have to figure out how to deal with them.
And I'm so happy to see someone like yourself having a conversation like this and making the steps that you're taking, because it makes me think of DL culture and how destructive that is to us as a whole, with, you know, men who are afraid to be honest with themselves and subsequently the people around them.
Right.
And as a result, that leads to us not accurately being counted and not having the kinds of conversations that we need to have so that we as a community can move forward. Because I think about like politicians who, like we talked about earlier, closeted politicians.
Right. So they have tried to implement some of the worst of the discrimination bills against LGBT people.
Right.
And a lot of them are, in fact, closeted men. You know, they could be more destructive to our community than we are.
Right.
But society has not done a great job of finding support for people, or even understanding the journey that a lot of people go through.
Right.
You know, whether it's from a small town, and I had firsthand knowledge of that. You know, I'm from a small town, very religious, and it was hard for me to be me until I actually left and turned 21. So it's a struggle. It's a human struggle, unfortunately. But with so many people coming out and being more authentic, and us trying to be more of an authentically based society, you know, I think it will get better.
Yeah, and I like that word, authenticity. That it's not about glamorizing being gay.
Right.
It's not about convincing anybody else that this is just a wonderful experience to have. Because for a lot of us, it's not. You know, growing up where I grew up, it was hellacious.
Right.
And, you know, but it's about authenticity, encouraging people to have real conversations. Because I think that trickles down into so many different aspects of our lives. Like, I hear Black women in particular talk about, oh, it's so hard to find a man because, you know, you just don't know who's DL or who's in the closet. And my rebuttal to that is, well, you don't make it easy for people to be authentic. You know, a man comes out or he expresses his interest in the same sex or whatever, and immediately he's no longer invited to the kickback.
Exactly.
You know, like it's a
catch-22.
So I'm really appreciative of you just being bold and being authentic.
Oh yeah.
And you know, taking such an amazing step.
Yeah, you know, for me, being authentic is something that I've always shown up to do. You know, even when I was in high school, you know, for some reason, we still had we didn't have separate proms, my school didn't, but in our county, we had two other schools that were still separate.
Separate in what ways? Like black and white prom? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and we also had to vote on separate, like, class favorites, like Mr. and Mrs. South Pike. It was a black one and it was a white one. And I graduated in '99.
So this is
how recent
not
it was.
Too far back in our history.
No, 20 years ago.
Jeez.
I still look pretty young, so.
You do. Very well observed.
But, you know, this was my norm, but I always felt that it was something wrong with that because it placed a Chinese wall between the races.
Yeah.
But it also allows us not to see each other as humans. And so there's something that's always been fundamentally wrong with that for me. And, you know, we had a group of white students that wanted to have a separate prom. And I was like, well, great. How are you going to pay for it? I'm not using school budgets to do that.
Right.
And so it turned into a big thing, but at the end of the day, we still had the same one prom that we've always had.
Right.
You know, for me, it's really about not feeding into that. You know, and I think some of us start to feed into the lies that we've been told about others and about this, that, and the other. One of the most humbling experiences for me was traveling abroad. you know, and leaving out of Mississippi,
right,
and understanding that how people live differently.
because that'll change you.
It will change you. It has changed me. It has changed my worldview.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, most Americans don't do that. They don't travel abroad. And, you know, it just so happens that they still have that same worldview as they did when they were in the States. So,
so I want to ask you, this is astonishing to me because it's not that far back in our history that racial biases were just at the forefront of the conversation for your school.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think, or they live in a bubble where they're fortunate enough to believe that racism is fictitious, or certain issues that other people experience are fictitious.
Right.
So I want to extend that to the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people who feel that a lot of the things that the gay community is fighting for, pushing for, the issues that we claim that we have are fictitious.
Right. They're not. And a lot of it is that right now gay people are just fighting to be seen. Mm-hmm. Is to be seen as a part of mainstream society.
Right.
And the unfortunate part is you have to start somewhere. Yeah. You know, black people had to start as the Mandy's or the slaves, and now the gay folks have to start as the comic relief or the flaming queen. Yeah. Until we get to that point where it's mainstream society. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of minorities have to start. But saying that we have fictitious fights is definitely not the case, because, you know, maybe about 4 years ago now, I was on the board of Georgia Equality. We had to fight the Religious Freedom Discrimination Act. It would have unleashed all kinds of nasty things on Georgia. I'm like, do we really? But gay folks have this fictitious battle, but you want to create a law that specifically targets gay people. Right. But they don't have a battle? Like, why are we doing this? Yeah. I mean, is this who we are as a state? Yeah. And at the end of the day, for me, once you give that person that inch, who are they coming for next? Because it won't stop there. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and that's why I was very careful about, you know, understanding why black people voted for, or, you know, tried to support this. I'm like, why? Oh, well, because I don't want my beliefs squashed. I was like, but you do realize that that's going to turn against you pretty soon. Exactly. This is just the first step. Yeah. Yeah. And you're out here boldly supporting it?
Because I think there's this fear that people have that they're going to lose ground. You know, like their sense of what is normal is going to be warped. And they're afraid of that. And I guess, I mean, we all carry that fear to a degree, where it's like, I don't want to step into what I don't understand. And so for us pushing for gay equality and pushing to be seen, and now you've got transgender folks snagging roles in movies and big TV shows, and like people are kind of like iffy about, well, where is this going to go next? Like what is going to be torn apart in my reality if the gays get what they want?
Right. Well, and we have a lot of gay folks that have issues with that too.
True. Truth
be told. But what people don't quite understand is that we change every day. And for some reason, we have gotten to the notion that nothing changes, everything stays the same, you know, and I'm comfortable with that. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You know, your own body changes every day. So you really expect the world around you to change, or not to change. Right. That's, you know, and people do primitively live out of fear, because that is what kept certain populations alive. Yeah. You know, and we also have to add some of the evolutionary parts to humanity. Right. It's something that we can't necessarily critically think or explain away. You know, some things are just evolutionary. You know, it's what created the fight or flight. It's what created, you know, whole societies based on safety. I said, if you really think about it, society is based on safety.
If you get elected to state senate, how important is it? Because what I like about your stance is that it's not militant. it's not militant. It's very inclusive.
Right.
And if I were not a gay person and I had no interest in gay rights, or I didn't even know a gay person, I can easily see myself and my family and my loved ones inserted in your stance. And I think that's powerful, because I think you sit in a place where it's like you're authentic to yourself, and you're very open and honest with who you are and who you represent, but you also have this part of you that is just very inviting and open to everybody.
Right.
So how can you speak to that? Like, how important is that inclusion for non-gays to you?
Well, for one, I don't operate out of a poverty mentality.
Gotcha.
And I think that's key in this, because what I'd like to see is I don't want to grab a slice of the pie, I want it to be able to grow larger.
Yeah.
And laws like, like I support legalizing cannabis.
Right.
Medicinally and recreationally, because that helps to grow the pie. I mean, at this point, if any kind of business or taxation benefits we can gain from that will help grow the community. And for me, community, I look at it from a 100,000 foot level. We all want the same thing. We want safety.
Right.
That's what society is for. And that could be if you're white, if you're black, if you're gay, straight, whomever. We are all looking for safety.
Yeah.
And it's very important for me to preserve that.
Gotcha. So,
yeah.
If you could say one last thing to the young black gay person who doesn't necessarily care about politics, knows nothing about who's running for state senate, local government of any kind, but is very much so marginalized, whether he realizes it or not, what would you say to that person?
Just being visible is the most important part. Even if you don't partake in politics, be seen. Because until we see and we understand, where they're coming from, and trying to and basically build a narrative of who they are, we can't do anything about you. Even if you don't like politics, it rules 100% of your life. It does.
That is true.
From where you buy groceries, from how much you pay for groceries, from what kind of clothes what kind of clothes you wear, where they come from. That is all politics.
Wow.
It's all politics.
Yeah. So, for the person who is interested in politics and who is definitely gearing up to go to the polls and vote, how can they find you digitally and learn more about your campaign and what you stand for? Okay.
So for me, I'm doing more of an electronic campaign because I do want to keep to my commitment of climate change. So I don't really want to print a whole lot of stuff.
Got you.
So you can find me on my website is drkellysjohnson.com. I am on Facebook at Dr. Kelly Johnson for Georgia. I'm on Twitter, same handle, Dr. Kelly Johnson for Georgia, and also Instagram, and that's Dr._Kelly Johnson 2020.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly,
Thank
for
you
talking
for having
to me
me
today.
Absolutely.